Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you. Um, for those who are in the Thursday group or attend the Thursday meeting, you'll notice that this theme is similar to my last Thursday talk. Similar because it's basically the same, but I've updated the talk a little bit in some ways, added a few things, but the quotes are more or less the same. And I think it's a subject, the Diamond Sutra, which is worth going over a number of times. So I've read the Diamond Sutra a number of times over the years, and always enjoyed it. And but it kind of goes back and forth between different statements and interrupts itself in a way by saying, if you read the Diamond Sutra, if you read only a few lines, it will give you infinite merit, and compares the amount of merit to various enormous quantities. And then I noticed in looking at it recently that it seems to break down, at least to my perusal, to three rather specific themes, and they just go around between them. And that made it sort of a little more clear for me to read and think about. While the three themes are interrelated, and I'm sure the design of the sutra has a purpose in intertwining them, because each time the themes come back up again, there's a slightly different angle on them. So it's kind of like, speaking of diamonds, looking at different facets of each theme. But I found it very illuminating and worthwhile to separate them out and start looking at what those themes were in order to clarify them a bit. The diamond is a little complicated, but it becomes a little less complicated and a little more clear when looked at in terms of these specific themes. And the main theme that I'll be focusing on tonight, of the mind's attachment, is a very specific area that can apply very nicely to life and practice. So I'm going to talk about the themes a little bit to start out and kind of do a little review of the sutra, and then talk a little bit about our modern sense of attachment and how that might apply to the way the Diamond talks about it, and then go back to the Diamond again, and also the Platform Sutra. For the quotes from the Diamond, I'm using a translation by Alex Johnson. So it kind of astonished me, and other people might disagree with me. I'm not a scholar, but when I recently noticed that the Diamond seems to be divided into these three main themes, one is what I think is the rather famous theme of not getting fooled by the mind's tendency to confine reality to names, definitions, and titles. And I think the Diamond is very well known for that. The most famous application of that idea is that I think people might be familiar with, is that a bodhisattva, someone who is trying to do good things and aspire to the vows and the qualities of a Buddha, does not think of themselves as a bodhisattva, because this would be substituting the reality of being or acting as a bodhisattva with a label or a definition or a title. And the labels and definitions of the title sort of pertain to the ego, not really to being a real person in the world or a real bodhisattva. So, imagine someone thinking to themselves, oh, wow, I'm a bodhisattva. Isn't that great? How great am I? And sort of having an egoic view of their own situation. And people might not think that explicitly, but it's a kind of exaggerated example of how we can take good intentions or good actions and turn them into labels or titles. An example of this is when the emperor of Wu asked Bodhidharma, famously, perhaps a little bit greedily for gaining bodhisattva points, hey, how much merit do I get for setting up all these Buddhist temples? And Bodhidharma said rather bluntly, no merit at all, you get nothing. And since the Emperor Wu didn't understand this kind of bluntness, or what the point of that answer was, the emptiness of actions, titles, merits, etc., he took offense. This also goes to the similar idea, which is also spoken about in the Diamond in that theme, that one should perform dana, giving of charity, without regard to getting acknowledged or rewarded. You know how someone who's been a generous philanthropist gets a building or hospital named after them? Well, the Diamond says that this is not something to aspire to, because once again, you turn yourself and your deeds into a set of labels. And the ego wants to, be given credit for this, patted on the head and said, didn't you do a great job? So when Thich Nhat Hanh was dying, the monks all talked about building a wonderful stupa, a giant memorial mound in his honor. And Thich said that would be a waste of temple grounds. But the monks were insistent. And so he said, if you have to build a memorial, it should have a plaque that says, I'm not in here and I'm not out there either. So that's befitting the Diamond Sutra and the emptiness of form. So that is a very important theme, because it allows us to aspire to just be ourselves, do good, do our practice, but not feed the ego with titles and rewards. Of course, we may allow and enjoy being acknowledged and acknowledging others. There's nothing wrong with that, but not to put too much stock into such things and turn it into a kind of a kind of a blanket definition of who we are, or label it, or hang on to those things. Along with this theme is the sub-theme repeated several times, that one who is beyond such labels has gone beyond conceptions of self, entity, or separate individuality, and has discarded the idea of a separate self. And so they don't attach to labels about the self. And that's kind of the other side of that same theme, and is also a very important theme, in some ways a main theme of the sutra. And while these themes are very important, there's another theme in the Diamond Sutra that's even more foundational, in my view, and that goes to the nature of the awakened mind and the way in which the mind may become awakened to a more free way of being. And this foundational theme is the one which awakened the mind of Huineng, and which is mentioned in the Sutra of Huineng, the Platform Sutra, which I will also talk about. That theme is that the mind should be used or comported in such a way that it's free of attachment. And that is not only the foundation of the teaching of the Diamond Sutra, but the foundation, in a way, of Buddhism itself and of Zen. To paraphrase Bodhidharma, everything is empty and not worth grasping onto. So let's talk about attachment for a moment, in this little sidebar, and how we think about it in non-Buddhist terms. There's a lot of talk on the, sort of in the Zen circuits, about not being attached. And there are some folks who will say, well, of course we're attached, we're attached to the people we care about. We're attached to the good things in our lives, the important things in our lives. And there's some debate about whether not being attached means, be completely detached, or, what that's about. In our modern way of thinking, we say that it's not great to be attached to unhealthy things, but that it's normal and healthy to be attached to healthy things. You want to be attached, in a sense, to your children, to your work, to, your good works. Hopefully you have some kind of feeling of attachment to your spouse, or, the people who are close to you in your family. And in a sense, this goes along with Buddhism as well. But it's a little bit dicey, because Buddhism does seem to say that we should not be attached to anything. But on the other hand, there's never been a Buddhist or a Zen person in history who didn't have what we would call attachments to friends, family, fellow monks if they're in a monastery, students, teachers. And Zen is full of stories of these connections and how meaningful they are. We could say that, maybe make a distinction between healthy connections as opposed to attachment or clinging. Or we could say that rather than throwing away all attachments and being so detached that you don't care about anything, that maybe we can, and I like this idea of softening our attachments and not holding on or clinging firmly or clingingly to the things in our lives. That obviously we don't want to disconnect from people and things. And part of the Bodhisattva vow is to care about people and care about beings. But when we hold on and try to control and cling, we have a very different relationship than just being happily connected. We're not able to go with changes, and we're not able to accept losses, which are difficult in any case. Ultimately, of course, we do have to let go of everything. And there are aspects of Buddhism that talk about that as well. But I think the diamond does point to a state of unattachment in which the mind is free to live in the moment and accept things as much as possible as they come and go. And that's a kind of freedom that we don't normally have outside of practice, and maybe a lot of practice. I want to say practice at practicing, but I don't think that's quite right. As Huangbo put it, I will let go with both hands. And that's kind of gives an idea of the rather radical sense of letting go. Just to mention in passing, the third theme of the Diamond Sutra, which is a bit of a contradiction, talks about the extreme amount of merit you can accrue by studying and sharing the Diamond Sutra. So it's kind of an early example of a self-promoting sutra. I think a few of the Mahayana sutras do that. They talk about how great they are. But then it also undercuts the whole enterprise by saying that the merit that you get from studying and sharing the Diamond Sutra is no merit. So kind of when you take it to the bank, you take all that merit, the amazing merit, more than, you know, the sands of the Ganges. When you take that merit to the bank, you can't get anything for it. You try to cash it in and there's nothing in your account. So it's kind of a fun self-promoting and then self-undercutting kind of reward. And since, you know, the Zen enterprise is somewhat about emptiness, it's kind of like a good reward to get nothing out of it. So let's take a look at what I think is the real diamond of the Diamond Sutra and how it is put in the sutra itself, and also occurs in the story of Huineng's awakening and transmission. And we'll go to Huineng and take his, you know, mentioning of the Diamond Sutra, because I think it's a really nice view of the diamond from sort of from the side of someone who has practiced it and been awakened by it. There are three sections in which the Platform Sutra of Huineng refers to the Diamond Sutra, two of them directly and one of them indirectly. The first is Huineng's initial awakening in the marketplace, and there he just says that his mind awakened, or something to that effect, when he heard the sutra being recited. It doesn't really say exactly what was being said at that time. The second reference is what you could call that an initial awakening, or, you know, a sudden unexpected kensho. You know, he's busy, he's illiterate, and he's carrying wood to sell in the marketplace, very poor. And he hears someone reciting the Diamond Sutra and boom, he wakes up. The second reference is when Hung Yen, the fifth patriarch, addresses the senior monk Shen Xiu regarding his famous poem expressing his enlightenment, which in the famous story, he wrote his poem on the wall. And Hung Yen said, oh yeah, that's great, because he was like the head monk and everybody loved him. But then Hung Yen took him aside privately and informed him that he had come to the door of enlightenment, but had not yet gone through the door of enlightenment. So here's this quote where he explains this to him, which I think is a wonderful passage. And this is from the Wang Mulam translation, my favorite of the Platform, and a really good one of the Diamond too. To attain supreme enlightenment, one must be able to know spontaneously one's own nature or essence of mind, which is neither created nor can it be annihilated. From katsana to katsana, from thought moment to thought moment, my very favorite Buddhist expression, one should be able to realize the essence of mind all the time. All things will then be free from restraint, i.e. emancipated. Once the tathata, suchness, another name for the essence of mind in Wang Mulam's commentary, another name for the essence of mind, once the suchness is known, one will be free from delusion forever. And in all circumstances, one's mind will be in a state of thusness. Such a state of mind is absolute truth. If you can see things in such a frame of mind, you will have known the essence of mind, which is supreme enlightenment. I especially like the idea of measuring experience from thought moment to thought moment. The word kasana is fascinating to me, and I don't think it exists outside of Buddhist thought, or perhaps it appears somewhere in yogic philosophy. So what is one doing at each moment? Are they lost in thoughts of clinging and attachment and feeling and responding accordingly, or are they free of such attachment? From kasana to kasana, from thought moment to thought moment. The final reference in the platform is when Hung Yen, the fifth patriarch, explains the Diamond Sutra to Hui Neng in the dark of night and gives him the transmission, making him the sixth patriarch. In one translation, Hui Neng says that upon hearing this explanation, quote, the bottom fell out of my bucket, or the bottom fell out of the bucket, meaning that any diluted sense of self that was left completely fell away. So that's a big, big awakening. Here's the quote. In the third watch of the night, I went to the fifth patriarch's room, using the robe as a screen. And he had to hide when he was doing this because everyone was so enlightened at the monastery that if they found out that their guy hadn't been given the transmission, they would have killed Hui Neng. So he had to be secretly transmitted, and then he had to run away, hide in the woods for 12 years. Anyway, using the robe as a screen, he expounded the Diamond Sutra to me. When he came to the sentence, one should use one's mind in such a way that it will be free from any attachment, I at once became thoroughly enlightened and realized that all things in the universe are the essence of mind itself. Who would have thought, I said to the patriarch, that the essence of mind is intrinsically pure, intrinsically free from becoming or annihilation, intrinsically self-sufficient, intrinsically, wait for it, free from change. Uh-oh, there goes dependent origination. Who would have thought that all things are the manifestation of the essence of mind? Knowing that I had realized the essence of mind, the patriarch said, for him who does not know his own mind, there is no use learning Buddhism, and I intend to drop my study immediately. On the other hand, if he knows his own mind and sees, that was my comment. On the other hand, if he knows his own mind and sees intuitively his own nature, he is a Buddha. And here's a little alternate translation from another translation of Hui Neng's transmission. The patriarch secretly explained the Diamond Sutra to Hui Neng, and when Hui Neng heard the phrase, one should activate one's mind so it has no attachment, he was suddenly and completely enlightened and understood that all things exist in self-nature. I kind of like that one too, a slightly different angle on it. So with all of that in mind, here are a few direct quotes from the Diamond Sutra on this subject, which I think, are on this common theme taken outside of the back and forth of the Diamond Sutra. I find these quotes quite astonishing when you just take a look at them for what they are all by themselves. They demand, or at least invite, a lot from us. So this is a quote from chapter 10, which I think really summarizes and defines the entire enterprise of practice in a sense and of the diamond in a nutshell. It contains the statement that was so awakening to Hui Neng in yet another translation. A disciple should develop a mind which is in no way dependent upon sights, sounds, smells, tastes, sensory sensations, or any mental conceptions. A disciple should develop a mind which does not rely on anything. So it's not saying not to see or not to hear. It's saying don't be dependent on your interpretation of what you see and experience, not to mention mental conceptions, what you think about it. Don't rely or depend on those. Therefore, Subhuti, the minds of all disciples should be purified of all thoughts that relate to seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and discriminating. They should use their minds spontaneously and naturally without being constrained by preconceived notions arising from the senses. And you can kind of extrapolate there that the preconceived notions that arise from the senses might relate quite a bit to conditioning from past experiences or traumas, things that happen to you, which you then develop an idea about how things are, what you should do and what you shouldn't do, or what's safe and what's not safe, rather than being in the moment and using your mind spontaneously and naturally based on what's happening directly in front of you through the senses and thought processes that you've been exposed to, through the experiences that you've had. You might come up with these preconceived notions, which you then apply instead of being in the moment. And it has a nice kind of comparison to this part of the Heart Sutra. And this is a slightly different translation than the one we usually use, but one that I like. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no feelings, perceptions, impulses, consciousness, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realm of eyes, and so forth until no realm of mind consciousness. Of course, these are both part of the Prajnaparamita Sutra group, so they're dealing with similar themes from related angles. But the idea of not depending on ideas that arise from the senses is a rather challenging one, especially in our empirically based culture. And you could say our empirically based organisms, because we depend on seeing and hearing and whatnot in order to get by from moment to moment and deal with our environment. And here's the next quote from chapter 14. Therefore, Subhuti, disciples should leave behind all distinctions of phenomena and awaken the thought of the attainment of supreme enlightenment. A disciple should do this by not allowing their mind to depend upon ideas evoked by the world of the senses, by not allowing their mind to depend upon ideas stirred by sounds, odors, flavors, sensory touch, or any other qualities. The disciple's mind should be kept independent of any thoughts that might arise within it. If the disciple's mind depends upon anything in the sensory realm, it will have no solid foundation in any reality. It's pretty interesting. If the disciple's mind depends upon anything in the sensory realm, it will have no solid foundation in any reality. This is why Buddha teaches that the mind of a disciple should not accept the appearances of things as a basis when exercising charity. Subhuti, as disciples practice compassion and charity for the welfare of all beings, they should do it without relying on appearances and without attachment. Just as the Buddha declares that form is not form, so he also declares that all living beings are in fact not living beings. And chapter 31 makes a final statement about this that's even a bit more stark. Subhuti, when people begin their practice of seeking to attaining total enlightenment, they ought to see, to perceive, to know, to understand, and to realize that all things and all spiritual truths are no things. There's that no merit coming up again. And therefore, they ought not to conceive within their minds any arbitrary conceptions whatsoever. So what does it mean not to conceive any arbitrary conceptions? Well, we know that we, have different experiences and we form different ideas about them and then apply them to other things. They're not necessarily based on what the reality of the situations are. They're based on whatever impressions we have and how we interpret them. And if we hold on to those things, then we get kind of a skewed version of reality based on our collected views. Note that it doesn't say don't form any conceptions at all, but we've been told not to base our ideas of self or reality on ideas based on sensory experience or based on ideas that are arbitrary. So what should our ideas be based on? A partial answer is given by going back to chapter 10 once again. We should use our minds spontaneously and naturally without being constrained by preconceived notions arising from the senses. And as has been pointed out a number of times around here, that includes having preconceived notions from the past and our ideas about the past and past experiences. So I think this suggests that our insight and understanding of true nature, which comes from practice, should spontaneously guide our understanding and impulses, and that we shouldn't hold on to arbitrary conceptions that come from, our accidental or various experiences, which we then hold on to and apply, whether they apply or not. So again, we should use our minds spontaneously and naturally without being constrained by preconceived notions arising from the senses. And that's something that I think we can look into and practice and look at our own ideas and how we interpret things when we do experience them, the thoughts we have about them and how we turn those into beliefs and conceptions. So I wonder what you all may think about this. I think it's pretty amazing to take a close look at the sutra and see the radical standpoint that it might be suggesting for us. Thanks.